I came home expecting silence. What I got instead was betrayal, parked exactly where my livelihood lived. My garage door was wide open, fluorescent lights blazing like a crime scene, and right in the center, where my workbench should have been, sat a pearl-white BMW that cost more than my entire house did when I bought it. Engine still ticking. Leather still warm. My space violated. And I knew immediately who did it. Because only one person in Willowbrook Estates acted like property lines were suggestions instead of law. I just finished a 12-hour electrical shift. Back aching. Hands raw. Head full of bills and deadlines. I wanted 5 minutes of quiet before picking up my daughter Emma the next morning. Instead, I got an HOA power play. I stood there breathing in that mix of motor oil and overpriced leather, boots crunching on my own concrete floor, trying to decide if I was too tired to be angry, or too angry to think straight. Then the car alarm went off. Sharp. Piercing. Accusatory. Like I was the criminal. I didn't touch it. I didn't even move. Because at that exact moment, heels clicked behind me. Slow. Deliberate. The sound of someone who wanted to be noticed. "Don't worry," a voice said, sugary and smug. "It's allowed." I turned. Brenda Whitfield stood there smiling, clipboard tucked under her arm, keys dangling from manicured fingers like she'd just won something. HOA treasurer. Neighborhood tyrant. The kind of woman who said community standards, the way other people said obey. "That's my garage," I said. She waved her hand like she was brushing off a fly. Emergency parking provision. Page 14. You left your door open overnight. I got home 10 minutes ago. She smiled wider. Still a violation. Then she handed me a citation. $200. For leaving my garage door open, while her BMW was parked inside it. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was unbelievable. "You parked your car in my garage without permission," I said. "That's trespassing." She tilted her head. "Learn community cooperation, Jake. You're new." 6 weeks later, she was crying into my voicemail. But I didn't know that yet. Back then, I thought this was just another HOA Karen trying to throw her weight around. I thought I'd argue. Appeal. Move on. That was my mistake. Because Brenda Whitfield didn't just want compliance. She wanted submission. See, Willowbrook Estates looked perfect on paper. Built between 2015 and 2018. Young families. Retirees. Quiet street. $180 a month for landscaping and lighting. I worked 6 years of overtime to get there. Ate ramen like it was gourmet. Bought a modest 3-bedroom because of one thing. The garage. 2-car. Detached. Enough room for my tools, my grandfather's workbench, and the treehouse I promised my daughter I'd build with my own hand. That garage was my sanctuary. And Brenda knew it. Her husband worked city planning. She mentioned it every chance she got. Like a threat wrapped in a fun fact. "You don't want to make this difficult," she said that night, tapping her clipboard. "The HOA has resources." I looked at the BMW again. Then at the fine. Then at her smile. And something clicked. Because this wasn't about a garage door. This was about control. And if I let this slide, just once, I'd be paying forever. So I did the one thing HOA Karens never expect. I didn't argue. I didn't appeal. I started documenting. Every notice. Every email. Every time she overstepped. Because if Brenda wanted to play authority, I was about to show her what real ownership looked like. And the next move she made? It crossed a line so illegal, even her city planner husband couldn't protect her. The next violation arrived 3 days later. Same envelope. Same smug HOA logo. Same handwriting that looked like it enjoyed punishment. This time, improper storage of commercial equipment. I laughed out loud. Because the commercial equipment was my toolbox. Closed. Against the wall. Inside my garage. The garage Brenda had illegally parked in. I checked the timestamp on the violation photo she attached. 6:12 a.m. I wasn't even home. That's when the unease set in. Because someone had been inside my garage while I was gone. Not a contractor. Not a city inspector. The HOA. I called the number on the notice. Straight to voicemail. I emailed. Auto-response. So I did what any reasonable homeowner would do. I pulled the HOA bylaws. Every page. Every clause. Every footnote written in 6-point font by people who thought loopholes were hobbies. And that's when I found it. Article 9. Section C. HOA representatives may not enter private, enclosed structures without written consent or court order. No exceptions. No emergencies. No Brenda clause. I printed it. Highlighted it. Then I checked my security camera footage. The cheap one I installed facing the garage after the BMW incident. And there she was. Brenda Whitfield. Key fob in hand. Opening my garage door. Stepping inside like she owned the place. She took photos. Moved my toolbox. Then left the door open. 10 minutes later? Another violation log. Garage left unsecured. She fined me for her own trespass. That's when anger turned into something colder. Focus. I emailed the HOA board directly. Attached screenshot. Time stamped. The bylaw excerpt. Professional tone. No accusations. Just facts. I gave them 48 hours. Brenda replied in 11 minutes. Not addressing the footage. Not denying entry. Just one line. HOA enforcement actions are final. Further harassment will result in additional fines. Harassment. For catching her breaking the law. That night, my daughter Emma asked why I was quiet. I told her adults sometimes forget how rules work. She nodded like she understood more than she should. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. Intent to lien. 4 unpaid fines. Totaling $1,400. My stomach dropped. Because liens aren't just threats. They're financial chokeholds. You can't refinance. You can't sell. And if you ignore them long enough? Foreclosure. All over fines that shouldn't exist. That's when I stopped thinking like a tired electrician. And started thinking like a homeowner with rights. I took a day off work. Drove downtown. Pulled public records. And learned something interesting about Brenda Whitfield. She'd missed 3 HOA payments herself. Late fees waived. No notices. No liens. Selective enforcement. That's illegal. Then I checked property tax record. Her house, valued at nearly $900,000, had an outstanding balance. Small. Ignored. But compounding. And the HOA bylaws? They required mandatory enforcement for all delinquencies. No discretion. No favorite. Meaning if they enforced rules against me, they legally had to enforce them against her. I compiled everything. Timeline. Screenshot. Emails. Bylaws. Public records. Then I sent one final message to the entire HOA board. Subject line. Formal notice of illegal entry, selective enforcement, and intent to file civil action. I gave them 7 days. 7 days to drop every fine. 7 days to remove the lien. 7 days to issue a written apology. Brenda replied again. This time with confidence. Good luck fighting City Hall. That was the moment she lost. Because she assumed I was alone. She didn't know I'd already spoken to an attorney. One who specialized in HOA abuse. One who smiled when he saw the footage. And one who told me something that changed everything. Jake, you don't just have a defense. You have leverage. And Brenda? She'd handed it to me herself. The lawyer's office smelled like old coffee and quiet confidence. No flashy plaques. No TV commercials. Just shelves of thick binders labeled with words like easements, liens, and HOA overreach. He slid my file back across the desk. Jake, he said, tapping the security footage printout, this isn't a gray area. That word hit hard. Because HOA fights are usually nothing but gray areas. He leaned back. Illegal entry. Selective enforcement. Retaliatory fines. And now a lien threat. Then he smiled. Congratulations. You've got a clean sweep. I asked the question I was afraid to ask. What's this going to cost me? He shook his head. They're paying. That's when he explained something Brenda never expected me to know. HOA boards are personally liable when they knowingly violate bylaws. Not the HOA. Them. Meaning if this went to court, Brenda's house wasn't just a prop in her power games. It was collateral. We drafted a demand letter that afternoon. Not emotional. Not angry. Surgical. It outlined every violation, cited statutes, included still frames of her inside my garage, and ended with a choice. Immediate removal of all fines and liens. Written admission of improper enforcement. Reimbursement of legal fees. Formal censure of the treasurer. Or a lawsuit naming Brenda Whitfield individually. The letter went out certified. 3 days later, the neighborhood noticed. Because suddenly, Brenda's BMW wasn't in her driveway. Her curtains stayed shut. And the HOA Facebook group, normally obsessed with lawn height, went silent. Until someone posted, "Why did the HOA cancel this month's meeting?" Then another, "Anyone else get refunded late fees?" Then another, "Why is Brenda no longer treasurer?" The board folded faster than wet cardboard. They called an emergency meeting without her, voted her out, suspended enforcement actions, and quietly began reversing everything she'd touched. I got an email from the HOA president. Subject: Resolution Proposal. They offered to drop the fines, remove the lien, pay my legal costs, and issue a clarification memo about privacy and enforcement limit. But my lawyer wasn't done reading. He circled one paragraph. Mutual non-disclosure. He laughed. They want silence, he said. Because if this gets out, every fine she ever issued becomes suspect. I thought about Emma. About the garage. My sanctuary. The place she helped me paint, laughing with a brush twice her size. I told him to counter. No NDA. Public record. And one more thing. An independent audit of HOA enforcement for the last 5 years. The board resisted. Hard. Because audits don't just find mistakes. They find patterns. But the alternative was court. And court meant discovery. Emails. Texts. Personal finances. They agreed. 2 weeks later, the audit results landed like a bomb. Brenda had selectively waived her own dues. Issued fines without quorum approval. And, this part mattered, used HOA enforcement to pressure neighbors into selling. 3 homes. All bought by shell LLCs. All traced back to her husband's planning firm. That's when the city got involved. Conflict of interest. Ethics violations. Investigations. Brenda didn't just lose her treasurer role. Her husband was placed on administrative leave. And that unpaid property tax? It ballooned once penalties were added. The HOA, legally required to enforce delinquencies equally, had no choice. They filed a lien. Against her. The same tool she'd tried to use on me. Only this time, it was real. And she couldn't make it disappear. Because the spotlight was on. And everyone was watching. The day the lien notice went public, the entire neighborhood felt different. Like the air had shifted. I was in my garage, door wide open on purpose now, when my phone started buzzing. One notification after another. HOA emails, neighborhood group messages, texts from people who had never said more than a polite hello before. Is it true about Brenda? Did you really take on the HOA? Thank you. That last one stuck with me. Because this was never supposed to be a crusade. I just wanted my garage back. But once the audit summary circulated, the fear barrier broke. Neighbors started comparing notes. Fines that made no sense. Violations that appeared out of nowhere. Waivers granted to friends of the board. Patterns. Ugly ones. And at the center of all of them, Brenda. She didn't come out of her house for days. Then one afternoon, I saw her. Standing in her circular driveway, phone pressed to her ear, pacing like a trapped animal. Designer sunglasses. Perfect hair. But her hands were shaking. That image burned into my memory. Because this was the same woman who had smiled while threatening to take my home. Now she was realizing power only works when people believe in it, and belief was gone. The HOA board called another emergency meeting. This time they asked me to attend. Not as a defendant, as a witness. The room was packed. Folding chairs borrowed from the clubhouse. Neighbors leaning against walls. Phones discreetly recording. The new president cleared his throat. "We want to apologize," he said, voice tight, "for failing to supervise." That sentence alone sent a ripple through the room. Because HOAs never apologize. They deflect. He continued. "Effective immediately, we are restructuring enforcement procedures. All fines require documented evidence. All actions require board vote. No single officer may issue penalties." Someone clapped. Then another. Then the room erupted. I didn't smile. Because I knew something they didn't yet. Brenda hadn't hit bottom. Not even close. A week later, a process server showed up at her house. I recognized the envelope. Foreclosure notice. Her unpaid dues, waived illegally for years, had finally been corrected. Retroactively. The amount was staggering. She tried to fight it. Filed appeals. Threatened lawsuits. But audits don't lie. And neither do bank statements. Her husband's firm distanced itself overnight. City ethics boards don't play games. Planning commissions don't forgive conflicts of interest. He resigned before they could fire him. The BMW disappeared. Then the landscaping crew stopped coming. Then the house went quiet. One Saturday morning, Emma and I were building her treehouse. Actual progress now, beams bolted, ladder up, when a moving truck rolled slowly down the street. It stopped. Right in front of Brenda's place. Emma looked at me. "Dad, is she leaving?" I didn't answer right away. Because part of me felt something unexpected. Not victory. Relief. The auction notice went up 2 months later. Public. Pinned to the HOA bulletin board. Same board where my fine notices used to hang. The house sold below market. Fast. No one wanted the stigma. The new owners tore out the circular driveway within a week. Planted trees. Put up a swing set. Life moved on. But the ripple didn't stop there. 3 former board members resigned. The HOA hired an external management company. Monthly dues dropped. And the bylaws were rewritten with language so tight it could have been drafted by a prosecutor. As for me, I got my garage. My sanctuary. No fines. No threats. No knock-on-the-door power trip. Just the hum of tools, the smell of sawdust, and Emma's laughter echoing off unfinished walls. Sometimes neighbors stop by now. Not to complain. To help. And every time that garage door closes at night, sealing off the world, I remember something important. HOAs only work when people are afraid. The moment someone stands up, the whole illusion cracks, and when it breaks loud. The thing no one tells you about standing up to an HOA? Winning doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence. The weeks after Brenda lost her house were eerily calm. No warning letters. No friendly reminders. No emails written in bold red fonts pretending to be polite. Just nothing. At first, I didn't trust it. Every time I pulled into my driveway, I half expected another notice taped to my garage door. Every envelope in the mailbox got opened slowly, like it might bite. But nothing came. Instead, something else started happening. Neighbors talked. Really talked. Not the fake HOA-approved small talk about lawn fertilizer or mailbox colors, but stories. Quiet ones. Angry ones. The kind people only share when they finally feel safe. Mrs. Churn told me she'd paid over $4,000 in fines over 3 years for lighting violations that were never documented. A retired couple on Pine Loop admitted they'd almost sold their home after being fined for a fence that had been approved in writing by Brenda herself, then later deemed non-compliant. Everyone had a Brenda story, and every story had the same ending: fear. That's when the new HOA board reached out again. This time, they weren't asking me to attend a meeting. They asked me to help. They wanted a resident oversight committee. Someone independent. Someone who understood bylaws, documentation, and, more importantly, abuse of authority. They wanted me. I laughed at first. Me? A guy who just wanted a garage workshop and a quiet life? But then I looked at Emma, sanding a beam for her treehouse with total concentration, and I thought about the world she was growing up in. I said yes. The first thing we did was brutal. We opened the books. 10 years of records. Every fine. Every waiver. Every exception. What we found made jaws drop. Selective enforcement. Personal vendettas. Fines issued without notice. Fees pocketed as administrative costs that went nowhere. Legal? No. Ethical? Not even close. The management company flagged multiple issues that could have sunk the HOA entirely if challenged in court. That's when the board made a hard choice. They voted to refund improperly issued fines. Not quietly. Publicly. Checks went out with apology letters. And suddenly Willowbrook Estates felt lighter. People waved again. Kids played in driveways. Garage doors stayed open. Including mine. But Brenda wasn't done. 3 months after losing her house, she filed a lawsuit. Against me. Against the HOA. Against the management company. Alleging harassment, discrimination, emotional distress. The letter arrived on a Thursday. I read it twice. Then a third time. And I laughed. Because for the first time, I wasn't alone. The HOA's lawyers responded within 48 hours. With evidence. Audit reports. Email records. Financial trails. Witness statements. My name barely appeared. Brenda's did. Over and over. Her attorney withdrew 2 weeks later. The case collapsed before it ever saw a courtroom. That was the moment I finally slept through the night. But the real payoff? It came from Emma. One evening, as we stood back and admired her finished treehouse, painted, sturdy, perfect, she asked a simple question. Dad, why didn't anyone stop her before you? I didn't have a perfect answer. So I told her the truth. Because people thought they were alone. She nodded like that made sense. And maybe it did. Because power doesn't disappear on its own. Someone has to turn on the lights. And Willowbrook? It was wide awake now. But there was still one final twist. One thing Brenda never saw coming. And it was about to change everything, again. The letter didn't come from a lawyer. That's how I knew it mattered. It was thin. Plain. No letterhead. No threats disguised as professionalism. Just a return address I didn't recognize and a name I definitely did. Brenda Whitfield. I stood in the garage staring at it, Emma's laughter drifting from the backyard where she was climbing her treehouse like she'd owned it her whole life. For a second, I considered tossing the envelope straight into the trash. Then I opened it. The handwriting was shaky. Uneven. Nothing like the crisp signatures she used to stamp on violation notices. Jake, I know you don't owe me anything. I know you probably hate me. I wouldn't blame you. But I need you to understand something. I didn't lose my house because of you. I lost it because I believed power made me untouchable. I read that line 3 times. She went on. She wrote about Brad leaving 2 weeks after the foreclosure. About friends who stopped answering her calls. About how the HOA role had started as helping the community and slowly turned into control because control felt like safety. That didn't excuse anything. But it explained a lot. The last paragraph hit harder than I expected. There are others like me. Different neighborhoods. Same playbook. If you don't stop them, someone else will end up where I am. Please don't let that happen. No threats. No demands. Just a warning. I folded the letter and sat on the old workbench, the one my grandfather had built with his hands. The smell of sawdust and oil grounded me. Because she was right. Brenda wasn't the disease. She was a symptom. Over the next few weeks, the oversight committee started getting emails. Not from Willowbrook. From everywhere. Stories poured in from other HOAs. Different states. Same characters. Treasurers with unchecked authority. Presidents rewriting rules mid-sentence. Management companies rubber stamping whatever kept the fees flowing. One message stood out. A woman named Claire from a neighboring county wrote that her HOA had started foreclosure proceedings over unpaid fines totaling less than $900. Her husband was deployed overseas. She was terrified. That's when the board made the call. We hosted an open forum. Not just for Willowbrook. For anyone. We invited a housing rights attorney, a financial auditor, even a former HOA manager who'd turned whistleblower. The room was packed. People stood along the walls. Some cried. Some yelled. Some just listened like they'd been holding their breath for years. And then something incredible happened. Other HOA board members showed up. Quietly, nervously, they asked questions. Real ones. About transparency. About limits of authority. About what happens when power goes unchecked. That night didn't make headlines, but it started a fire. Within months, 3 nearby HOAs rewrote their bylaws. 2 removed fining authority without due process. 1 dissolved entirely and handed common areas back to the city. And me? I never ran for president. Never wanted the title. I stayed exactly where I was. Watching. Documenting. Teaching people how not to be afraid of a letter in their mailbox. Brenda never wrote again. But I heard through the grapevine she moved out of state. Took a clerical job. Kept her head down. Maybe she learned. Maybe she didn't. What I do know is this. Power hates witnesses. The moment people start paying attention, it changes behavior. And Willowbrook Estates? It became something rare. A neighborhood where rules existed, but fear didn't. Where garages stayed open. Where kids built treehouses without permit. Where an HOA remembered it worked for the people. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because 6 months later, a certified letter arrived from the state. And it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to the HOA. Subject line bolded at the top. Formal investigation notice. Turns out, someone had been watching Brenda long before I ever met her. And now, they were asking questions no one could dodge. The room went silent when the investigator finished speaking. No yelling. No gavel banging. No dramatic threats. Just quiet. The kind that makes your ears ring. The state investigator closed her folder, looked directly at the remaining HOA board members, and said one sentence that permanently changed Willowbrook. This investigation did not begin with Brenda Whitfield. Every head snapped up. She explained that complaints had been filed years earlier. About selective enforcement. About undisclosed financial incentives between HOA officers and management companies. About fines being used as leverage instead of compliance. Brenda hadn't started it. She'd escalated it. And because she'd been loud, careless, and arrogant, she left a paper trail a mile long. Bank statements. Email chains. Meeting minutes quietly altered after vote. The investigator didn't accuse anyone in that room. She didn't need to. Because the evidence spoke for itself. Over the next 3 months, everything unraveled. The management company was terminated and later fined by the state. 2 former board members were personally liable for misappropriated funds. Insurance premiums skyrocketed when underwriters realized how exposed the HOA had been to lawsuit. Then came the final blow. The state ruled that Willowbrook's foreclosure process violated consumer protection laws. Every foreclosure action taken in the last 5 years was invalid, including Brenda's. But here's the twist nobody expected. Brenda didn't get her house back. Because it had already been sold, legally, by the bank after her default. Instead, the HOA was ordered to compensate her for damages. Not out of sympathy. Out of accountability. And that payout? It came directly from HOA reserve. Which meant dues were frozen. Budgets were slashed. And the HOA lost the authority to fine homeowners for 2 full years. No leverage. No fear. Just service. The board dissolved shortly after. Not dramatically. Quietly. Voluntarily. They voted to transition Willowbrook into a community association with no enforcement power, No fines and no foreclosure authority. Only shared maintenance. Only transparency. Emma asked me one night why the neighborhood felt happier. I told her the truth. Because people aren't scared of their own mail anymore. Years have passed since then. I still work as an electrician. Still build things with my hands. Still keep the garage door open when I'm working late. But sometimes neighbors stop by. Not to complain. To ask questions. About their own HOAs. About letters they don't understand. About whether they should be afraid. I always tell them the same thing. Read everything. Document everything. And never assume authority equals legality. Because the most dangerous people aren't the loud ones. They're the ones who think no one's watching. Brenda thought power made her untouchable. She was wrong. Power only lasts until someone turns on the light. And once that happens, everything hiding in the dark panic. That's the real lesson here. Not revenge. Not victory. Awareness. Because the moment ordinary people stop being afraid of petty authority, it collapses under its own weight.